I started by asking what he thought had made his book such a publishing sensation.
Well, it was the astonishment that people felt that they'd bought into the fairy tale, the questing Prince of Wales, Prince Charles, and the beautiful princess, and the Archbishop of Canterbury himself during their wedding vows talked about this fairy tale, and in a curious way, it was a postmodern fairy tale because there was no happy ending, and I think that single issue propelled the book into international status. And also Diana herself single-handedly turned the royal family into being what you might call a home counties monarchy, into an international institution.
You, I know, spent many, many days, weeks, listening to her voice, listening again and again to what she had to say on the tapes. Now, presumably you've had to go back and start that process again before the release of these latest tapes. How did it feel? How did it feel to have that voice back in the room with you?
It's quite eerie, to be honest with you, and it can be quite unnerving, especially when you listen to parts where she talks about her ambition for the future is to, just walk along a street in Paris. Well, we all know what happened. And some elements of it make the hair stand up on the back of your neck. Some of the things she says are quite humorous. I mean, it's not all doom and gloom. She didn't take herself too seriously. So you get a far more nuanced feeling of her character listening to her voice than perhaps you do with reading the words on a page.
Well, we'll come to that fateful weekend in a moment, but you said she talked about her own hopes for the future. Had what happened not happened, what do you think she would have wanted for herself?
Well, what she wanted was primarily for her sons, and this is what I find fascinating, that her ambition was to see Prince Charles, her estranged husband, go off to Italy, as she said, with his lady, meaning Camilla, and take up farming, sketching, and watercolours and the rest of it, and leave her to guide Prince William into his future destiny as king. That is to say, to jump a generation. Well, that never happened. But the other point she also made was she saw Harry very much as a backup, as a wingman to William in the difficult, lonely job that he will face. Well, that hasn't happened either. So you could say that her ambitions have been thwarted by the effects of other decisions and by time.
And I guess of her own passing, she herself obviously was not there to try and make that vision a reality. And we're talking this weekend about that moment. Now, in the car with her in Paris, of course, we know was Dodi Al Fayed, whose father also passed this weekend. Can we talk for a moment about the Al Fayeds? I know that you met Mohamed Al Fayed. What kind of man was he?
Well, I met him to interview him at Harrods, and it's the only interview where I've actually turned the tape off because his talk was so profoundly scatological and littering the whole conversation with the F-bomb, etc., that it just wasn't worthwhile. With hindsight, I should have actually taped the whole thing and then just printed it with asterisks. But he struck me as a man who was absolutely obsessed with the fact that he believed that Prince Philip and the Secret Service were behind the death of his son and Diana. But I got the sneaking feeling, really, that he was the man who made the final decision when his son said, "Shall we go back to the flat? And this is our plan. A decoy vehicles to leave from the front of the Ritz and we'll leave from the back." He gave it the okay. So in the sliding doors moment, he didn't say, no, just stay in the Ritz Hotel. He said, off you go. And that fateful decision led, as we know, to the Pont d'Alma tunnel.
I mean, it's clear that Al Fayed had a sort of mission. Presumably, people say he wanted to join the British establishment, but he also then loathed it because he felt it rejected him. So he started to play quite an outsized role in British politics as well. Looking back, what do you think his impact was? There are people today who work for him who say that actually, who are making the case that he was actually some kind of reformer because he blew the whistle on members of parliament who he had paid to ask questions.
Well, I wouldn't say he was a reformer. He was a very smart and shrewd businessman beneath that kind of cloak that of being a revolutionary, as it were. I think that he was desperate to be accepted by the British establishment. He sponsored, for example, the Windsor Horse Show and was pictured with the Queen. He supplied goods and services to Kensington Palace, to Buckingham Palace. So he was desperate to be accepted. And the fact that he was rejected by the establishment meant that they had a cool, cunning, and clever, beneath all the bombast, enemy in their dark heart.
You, of course, Andrew, will always go down in history. I think Diana referred to you as the noted author and historian. You will go down in history as a man who changed the way we think about, the way we perceive the royal family. And you've been an observer of the institution for, well, decades now. We're a year on now from the we're a year on now from the accession of the new king. How's he doing?
Well, it's very much business as usual. I mean, when you look at the accession of Elizabeth II, it was seen as a new Elizabethan age, that the monarchy would bring a sense of change and vibrancy to post-war Britain. Didn't happen, but nonetheless, that was the feeling. When Prince Charles became king, it was very much seen as, you know, a familiar face, a safe pair of hands, who's continued to do very much what has been expected of him.
Do you think that the monarchy has any kind of future? Because lots of people talked a lot about, you know, this is the end of it when the late Queen passed, that this would be the beginning of the end for the institution. But from what you're saying, you think it's pretty much going to be there for a while.
I think it's going to be there for a while. I mean, the succession is assured. You've got William, you've got George, and so it will take it beyond our lifetimes. And it's really, but I always think it's a bit like changing your bank account. It's more trouble than it's worth to find something else. And you know, the monarchy goes through a series of cycles. It's a bit like the births, marriages, and deaths columns of a local newspaper. The exciting part are when the children grow up and when they start dating, who they marry, who the children are going to be. So we're in that lull now where the children are at school. They're vaguely interesting, but not that interesting. They'll become more so. The interesting question is going to be, how will Meghan and Harry introduce Archie and Lilibet to their cousins, and when and how will they get along? Because clearly their parents don't.
Do you expect them ever to return to these shores, to Britain?
What, and have Meghan Markle curtsying to Kate Middleton? I don't think I don't think so. I don't see that as a runner. They've got their own lives in California. They've got their own set. They've got their own influence, and they've got their own companies.
So I guess in the end, what you are telling me is that you think the chances of reconciliation are never zero, but they are pretty slim.
Yeah, I mean, the the first rule of royal reporting is never say never. So it could happen, but I don't see any reason why they should get together. And it's rather like the Duke and Duchess of Windsor. When they left Britain and went into exile, they made their own lives in France and on the east coast of America, and they made the occasional foray into Britain. They stayed at the homes of friends or at hotels, and I think you'll see exactly the same with Meghan and Harry. That they'll stay at hotels, they'll stay with friends. They won't trouble the royal family. And as I say, the difficulty is going to be, how do you make friends with your young cousins, with Archie and Lilibet, if you never see them?
A story that's not going to go away, and I expect that you will be, as ever, in the forefront of reporting it. Andrew Morton, thank you very much.
My pleasure.